close your eyes and picture an Australian. What do you see? A suntanned surfer standing beside a barbecue? A smiling man in a wide-brimmed hat saying, "Day, mate," while a kangaroo hops past him? Perhaps there is Vegemite on the table, a deadly snake under the chair, and a shark waiting just beyond the beach. You're not alone. For decades, this version of Australia has traveled across the world through films, television, advertising, and tourism campaigns. It has become so familiar that millions of people accept it without ever questioning where it came from. But there is something strange hiding beneath that cheerful image. Many Australians barely recognize themselves in it. Some of these stereotypes contain a tiny piece of truth. Others were exaggerated until the truth almost disappeared. One of the most famous was popularized by an advertisement created for people outside Australia. And the final stereotype does something far more serious. It reduces an ancient, diverse, and complicated country to a single face, while making millions of real Australians almost invisible. Today, we are uncovering 10 stereotypes about Australians that are actually wrong. Keep count of how many you believe, because the closer we get to number 1, the more the familiar image of Australia begins to fall apart. Number 10. Every Australian constantly says "day, mate," and "crikey." Imagine arriving at an Australian airport for the first time. You walk through the doors, listening carefully. You expect someone to turn, smile, and greet you with a loud "day, mate." But instead, you hear ordinary greetings. "Morning. Hey, how are you going?" And perhaps the most shocking discovery is that you may say "day" more often than the Australians around you. Australians certainly use the phrase. It is real, and in some communities it remains common. Mate is also deeply connected to Australian speech and culture. But not every Australian uses these words constantly. Age, location, family background, and social setting all affect the way people speak. A farmer in rural Queensland may sound very different from a young professional in central Sydney. And crikey became especially famous overseas through Australian television personalities. Many Australians know it, but that does not mean they shout it every time something surprises them. Popular culture selected the most recognizable expressions, turned up the volume, and exported them to the world. The words were real. The universal character was not. But language was only the beginning, because one of the most famous Australian food traditions was also shaped for an audience thousands of miles away. Number 9. Australians live on Vegemite and shrimp on the barbie. The image seems almost sacred. A barbecue burns beneath the Australian sun. Someone places shrimp over the flames while friends laugh and pass around slices of bread covered with thick, dark Vegemite. There's just one problem. Australians normally call them prawns, not shrimp. The phrase "shrimp on the barbie" became internationally famous after it was used in an Australian tourism advertisement aimed at American viewers. The wording was chosen because Americans would immediately understand it. It worked almost too well. The phrase traveled so far that people began treating it as something Australians naturally said every weekend. A line designed to sell the Australian experience slowly became the Australian experience in the minds of outsiders. Then there is Vegemite. Some Australians genuinely love it. For them, its salty taste can carry memories of childhood breakfasts, school lunches, and family kitchens. Others dislike it completely. Many eat it only occasionally. And there is a hidden rule foreigners often discover too late. Vegemite is normally spread very thinly. It is not chocolate. It is not jam. Covering an entire piece of bread with a thick black layer can feel less like breakfast and more like a punishment. Australian food is far more varied than prawns, barbecues, and one famous spread. But the simpler image survived because it was easy to recognize. And the same thing happened to the Australian coastline. Number 8. Every Australian knows how to surf. The stereotypical Australian does not merely visit the beach. He seems to have been born there. He is tanned, athletic, and completely fearless. He carries a surfboard under one arm and moves through the waves as naturally as other people walk across a room. Australia does have one of the world's most famous surfing cultures. Its beaches have produced champions legends, and communities shaped by the ocean. But being Australian does not automatically give someone the power to stand on a surfboard. Millions of Australians have never surfed. Some dislike deep water. Some live far from famous beaches. Others may visit the coast only during holidays. Even among people who live near the ocean, surfing is still a skill that requires time, balance, courage, and practice. The stereotype takes one highly visible part of Australian culture and quietly turns it into the whole country. A person living in an apartment in Melbourne, commuting through Sydney, or working on a farm in an inland community may have little connection to surfing at all. But the surfer image created another belief. If Australians spend their lives under the sun beside the ocean, then surely they must all be relaxed, carefree, and untouched by stress. That assumption is more complicated than it appears. Number 7. All Australians are laid back and carefree. Australians often communicate with casual language, dry humor, and understatement. Someone might describe a serious problem as a bit of trouble. A major success may be dismissed with, "It went all right." Even authority figures are sometimes addressed with a level of informality that surprises visitors. From the outside, this can look like a nation where nobody worries about anything. But a casual voice does not always mean a carefree life. Australians deal with demanding jobs, expensive housing, long commutes, family responsibilities, and intense competition. Behind the relaxed expression may be pressure, ambition, or fear that is simply not being displayed openly. Australian culture often respects people who do not boast about themselves. Humor may be used to break tension. A joke can hide discomfort. An understatement can make a difficult moment easier to carry. That relaxed surface is real for some people. But it can also become a mask. Australians are not one shared personality. Some are easygoing. Some are anxious. Some are quiet, driven, impatient, serious, or intensely ambitious. The stereotype feels positive, but even positive stereotypes can erase reality. They can make people feel that they must remain cheerful when life is anything but easy. And perhaps Australians learn to hide fear because, according to the outside world, danger is waiting everywhere. Number 6. Deadly animals are hiding around every corner. A visitor puts on a shoe and expects a spider inside. They walk through a garden and imagine a snake beneath every plant. They enter the ocean and immediately picture sharks, jellyfish, and creatures they cannot even name. Australia does have extraordinary wildlife. Some species are genuinely dangerous, and pretending otherwise would be foolish. That small truth gave the stereotype enormous power. Documentaries highlight the most frightening encounters. News stories travel farther when they involve huge spiders or venomous snakes. Online videos turn rare moments into something that appears to happen every morning. But ordinary Australian life is not a daily battle for survival. Millions of people leave their homes, travel to work, collect their children, and return safely without wrestling a crocodile or escaping a snake. Australians learn basic precautions. They respect warning signs. They understand that certain regions and seasons require greater care. Knowledge makes the strange environment feel far less mysterious. The animals are real, but the constant terror is not. In fact, many Australians can go years without encountering the creatures foreigners assume are waiting beneath every bed. Yet the image remains powerful because fear is memorable. A normal suburban street does not travel around the world as quickly as a photograph of a giant spider. But even if the creatures are not everywhere, surely the burning heat is. Number 5. Australia is always hot and sunny. A traveler packs shorts, sandals, and light shirts. They imagine endless blue skies and warm evenings. Then they arrive during winter and discover something they were never prepared for. Cold. Australia is enormous. Treating it as one climate is like treating an entire continent as one room. The tropical north can be hot and humid, while southern cities experience cold rain and sharp winds. Mountain regions receive snow. Tasmania can feel completely removed from the endless summer shown in tourism posters. Desert areas may burn during the day and become surprisingly cold after sunset. Even famous cities do not share identical weather. An Australian in Darwin may be experiencing conditions that feel nothing like those faced by someone in Melbourne or Hobart. The hot Australian summer is real. So are floods, storms, frosty mornings, and people standing in winter coats, wondering why foreigners believe it never became cold. The stereotype survives because sunlight photographs beautifully. Gray skies, wet shoes, and shivering commuters are less useful when selling paradise. But the weather is not the greatest geographical illusion. The stranger illusion concerns where Australians supposedly live. Number 4. Most Australians live in the Outback with kangaroos. The red earth stretches towards the horizon. A lonely building stands beneath an enormous sky. Kangaroos move across the land while a rugged Australian watches from the doorway. It is a powerful image. The Outback occupies an important place in Australian history, art, and national imagination. Its size can inspire both awe and fear. It represents distance, endurance, and the terrifying beauty of isolation. But it is not the everyday home of most Australians. Most live in urban areas, many of them concentrated around coastal cities. Their daily surroundings are more likely to include traffic lights, supermarkets, apartment buildings, suburban streets, and crowded public transport. The quiet Outback image hides a highly urban country. And what about the kangaroos? They can appear near regional communities, on roads, across open land, and sometimes around outer suburbs. But they do not casually hop through every major city center, and Australians certainly do not ride them to work. That joke sounds ridiculous, yet some Australians have been genuinely asked whether kangaroos are used like horses. The deeper surprise is that the image outsiders associate most strongly with Australia comes from places many Australians rarely visit. The Outback is real and deeply significant, but it is not the whole country. And once we move from the open interior into Australia's cities and communities, another myth becomes impossible to ignore. Number 3. Every Australian has the same strong accent. You have probably heard someone attempt an Australian accent. The voice becomes loud. The vowels stretch. Every sentence ends with mate, whether it belongs there or not. But listen carefully to real Australians, and the single voice begins to split into many. Some accents are broad and instantly recognizable. Others are softer. Speech can change with location, age, education, family history, and cultural background. A person raised in a rural community may sound different from someone raised in inner-city Perth. The voices heard in multicultural parts of Sydney or Melbourne carry influences that older films rarely showed. Even two Australians from the same city may speak differently. The famous broad accent became dominant overseas because it was easy to identify. Filmmakers could use a few words and sounds to tell the audience, this person is Australian. But real voices are not labels. Some genuine Australians are told by foreigners that they do not sound Australian enough. Think about how strange that is. An imaginary voice has become so powerful that a real Australian can be judged against it and somehow appear less authentic. But if outsiders misunderstand how Australians speak, the next myth reaches even deeper. It enters old ships, forgotten prison records, and family secrets. Number 2. All Australians are descended from convicts. In 1788, British ships carrying convicts arrived at Sydney Cove. Over the following decades, more than 160,000 convicted men and women were transported to Australian colonies. Their stories became woven into the country's history. Some had committed serious crimes. Others were transported for theft and offenses driven by poverty. They endured brutal journeys, harsh punishment, forced labor, and separation from everything they knew. For generations, some families concealed these connections. Convict ancestry could carry shame. Then something changed. Many descendants began searching old records and reclaiming those stories. What had once been hidden became a source of fascination, resilience, and even pride. But not every Australian descended from those prisoners. Free settlers also arrived. Gold discoveries attracted migrants from different parts of the world. Later generations came from Europe, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, the Pacific, and beyond. And long before any British prison ship appeared, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples had lived on the continent for tens of thousands of years. Their cultures, languages, and spiritual connections to country were already ancient when the first convict settlement began. To say every Australian descended from convicts does not merely simplify history. It places the opening page in the wrong century. Convict ancestry is one powerful thread in Australia's story. It is not the entire fabric. And that leads us to number one, the stereotype hidden beneath all the others. The belief that there is only one kind of Australian. Return to the person we imagined at the beginning. White, tanned, British descended, speaking with a broad accent, living near the beach or somewhere in the Outback. That person may exist, but he was never the whole country. Australia does not have one face. It does not have one ancestry, one accent, one lifestyle, or one cultural memory. Its story includes Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples whose histories reach back at least 65,000 years. It includes the descendants of convicts and free settlers. It includes families whose roots stretch through China, India, Vietnam, Italy, Greece, Lebanon, Nigeria, New Zealand, the Pacific Islands, and countless other places. An Australian may live beside the ocean without knowing how to surf. They may live in a city and never see a wild kangaroo. They may love Vegemite, hate it, or never keep in the house. They may say day, or they may never say it at all. The most unsettling truth is not that the stereotype is completely invented. It is that one small, carefully selected part of Australia was repeatedly shown to the world until it appeared to represent everyone. The mask became more famous than the faces beneath it. That is how stereotypes gain their power. They remove complexity. They make a country easier to recognize, but harder to understand. The imaginary Australian is simple. The real Australian is not. And that is what makes the truth far more interesting. Stereotypes are like postcards. They may show something recognizable, but they are far too small to hold an entire country. Australia is ancient and modern, urban and remote, familiar and surprising. It is shaped by painful history, extraordinary survival, constant change, and millions of people carrying different memories. So, how many of these stereotypes did you believe? Share your number in the comments. And if you are Australian, tell us the stereotype you are most tired of hearing. If you enjoyed uncovering the truth behind Australia's familiar image, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Then watch our next video, where we reveal 5 ways to tell if you have convict ancestry without taking a DNA test.